Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well today, or good day. I'm not sure what time zone you're in, most likely still morning. I'm going to share my screen now, and as well, I know the conveners were going to paste some links into the chat, and those links are going to be for you to be able to follow along with today's presentation on your own, as well as a link to a worksheet that supplements the material I'm going to present on today. So let me start sharing my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that. Good morning. I am Lauren Kehoe, the Accessibility and Accommodations Librarian at NYU Libraries, and I'm here today to present on a project that the NYU Libraries undertook about 3 years ago, and it's still kind of ongoing, to make our LibGuides accessible at NYU. And there's a lot of kind of background information I'm going to share about how this project developed, as well as some of the nuance and details of the project that we undertook. So I do hope today will be a useful presentation for you to then kind of take back to your own organizations and apply some of the principles to your own LibGuides. Again, today I am going to present on how the Division of Libraries at NYU Libraries worked together to plan and lead a project to remediate the corpus of LibGuides. And by corpus, I mean, at the time, about 600 distinct guides authored by about 100 different content creators. So LibGuides also called research guides at our organization through the SpringShare content management platform. And we did this remediation all with a lens of universal design and for better accessibility. So this project did result in providing our students and other community members with a more welcoming, accessible, and inclusive experience in using these research guides. So I'll present a little bit on the ways that, again, like I said, the evolution of the project, the kind of context in which we were began doing this project because of various other things happening at the organization regarding accessibility. And then we will also talk about the research that the user experience team did in order to inform the project, and then the training and the actual work that we did. Thank you. So the agenda, again, introduction for 5 minutes, the user research for about 10 minutes, LibGuides accessibility remediation will be the bulk of today's presentation, kind of the nuance and the nuts and bolts of what we did, and then lessons learned, finally, and then time for, hopefully ample time for Q&A. Okay. A little bit about who I am. I've already given you my name and my title description, but I also wanted to just situate myself in the library world and kind of organization within which I work in. I am a Accessibility Accommodations Librarian, but previous to that, I was an instruction librarian. And about 5 years ago, when I joined NYU, I was asked to be the liaison for students with disabilities in the library. And I have to confess, this was something that I didn't have any experience with. I was new in the organization, and the individual who had been doing this work for about 30 years asked if I wanted to take on this responsibility, and explained a little bit about what that work would entail, which was mostly at that time providing remediated materials to students who identified as having a disability. So it would either be providing an audiobook format for a physical book we had in the collection, or providing an accessible scan of a reading so that it could be used with assistive technology. So it's mostly just delivering accessible versions of materials we had in our collection. But as well, we have 2 adaptive technology labs for students with disabilities that have specialized software. And so it was managed, specialized assistive technology software. So that was also managed by the accommodations liaison. So I took on that role, and I quickly discovered that the university and the organization and the world was evolving in its approach to accessibility, which is amazing to me, because I think I came into this work at a time when, there is a shift. The ADA is 30 plus years at this point. There's a lot of work to still do, but with the kind of advent of digital technologies and the growth of using various technology, there's really kind of like a pivotal moment right now. And so this role that I now have kind of transitioned from just managing the space and working within the kind of remediated materials, providing that into a more broader kind of let's talk about policy and other programs that we can undertake. So this LibGuides remediation partnered with a web like a larger web accessibility program, and so it's really kind of grown from where it began. That's enough about me, I think. I do also like to describe the images on my screen. And so it is my headshot. I am a white woman in her early 40s. I usually wear black shirts, and today is no different. Okay, so moving on to kind of my department and kind of where and why this project took place in the user experience department. We manage many of our software in the library, and so LibGuides, or excuse me, the whole SpringShare product platform is one of those tools that we manage. And so it made sense that the LibGuides project would come into the user experience department, and then I sit in the user experience department, and kind of this was an accessibility project. So I had an extra kind of involved role in building this. But to provide a little foundation of what the user experience's principles are, because we're not just managing software, we do communications, we help do student and faculty and user research, we do kind of project management. So we have these principles that guide the work that we do. So on this slide, you'll see an image of the design principles in the form of 5 boxes, each containing titles of the principles and icons representing those principles. And I'm about to go into what those are. So the first is make evidence-based decisions. We do a lot of research to ensure that we are going to be effectively and meaningfully completing projects that we take on. Prioritize inclusion, diversity, belonging, and equity from the outset. And those 4 principles are very much part of the larger division of libraries principal strategic priorities. And it's a division-wide initiative. We also think sustainably. We balance impact with effort. And then most relevant for today's presentation, we design for accessibility, we design for everyone. So our users have, and what grounds us in this particular principle is that our users have a range of hearing, movement, sight, and cognitive abilities. We champion accessible design in our products and services because it benefits everyone. We are user aware in our design. We aim for simple and effective products that meet or surpass industry standards. This is also informed by ensuring that accessibility is baked into all projects, research, and service relationships from the beginning. And as a result, we have successfully now proposed to add this principle to the IDBE framework, and it's now IDBEA, inclusion, diversity, belonging, equity, and accessibility. And this is the #1 strategic priority of the libraries. Okay. So grounded in those principles, we began to conduct our research. And I do want to give acknowledgement that the next couple of slides are created and were presented in another presentation from my colleague in user research, Harini Kanan. And so she put this together. She managed the research project, and I just want to acknowledge, thank you. So in January 2020, we started to plan a research project to better understand how students find, experience, and navigate NYU's research guides. At this point, we had never done an exploratory project on this topic, so we wanted to start broad with both our questions and users. The 3 main objectives we aimed to achieve were to discover how users learn about and access the research guides, to discover what users expect of these research guides, and to discover how users experience the library's research guides. So for today's presentation, we're going to focus mostly on the third objective, which produced findings most generalizable outside of NYU specific student experiences. The main questions that informed this third objective include, what are users' thoughts on the look and feel of the research guides? What are users' thoughts on content, organization, and navigation? So on this screen here, you're going to see an example of a research guide before its remediation. This actually wasn't even a live guide. This was used in our accessibility training, and it models some of the characteristics of our previous guide system. So on the slide, you're going to see an image of an NYU guide, and it's a screenshot from the Mushrooms Accessibility Demo training guide. It has top tab navigation, it has a 2-column layout, and the guides feature both green and purple color branding with poor visual contrast, plenty of images and infographics without alternative text or a long description, and then lots of dense text and lots of links. And so this was, as I said, kind of indicative of what the system looked like kind of across the system before we did the remediation. And so we really had to, again, based on the knowledge we had about usability and accessibility of web content, this user research we did, and applying various principles, we were able to kind of make a suggestion for how the guide system should be updated. And so we'll go into that in just a minute. Okay. So just a little bit more detail about some of the research. There were 14 participants. We conducted 30 one-on-one interviews with students, and they were conducted over Zoom as well. We used consent forms. And I should indicate that we had planned to do this kind of during previous to the COVID pandemic kind of shutting us down, and we quickly had to adapt to using the Zoom platform, which we're all now very familiar with. So it should be noted that we did not specifically recruit students with disabilities. We are sharing this research because the findings that emerged are very much in line with universal design principles, especially as it relates to easing cognitive overload. As a result, these research findings helped to inform changes to the LibGuides, which I will again go into greater detail in a couple of minutes. We again planned in-depth 30 to 45-minute one-to-one interviews. The interviews were also recorded, and the interviewer, Harini in this case, our user experience researcher, offered opportunities for the participants to be as comfortable as possible, and again trying to apply universal design principles and accessibility principles. So she informally asked about comfort and needs, encouraged participants to keep their videos off if they needed to, and again this practice has become much more formalized over time. So what did we discover? Okay, some of the findings include, and they're on the screen here for you on the left column box, are some of the content components, some of the things about the actual resources that were included in the research guides, and then on the right box were the design components that kind of were identified and informed how we restructured the layout of our system. Okay, so a lot of great information came out of this research. So we're going to focus on findings related to design and content. From this perspective, students found research guides overwhelming, stressful, and unclear. Okay, so there are multiple aspects of content design that contributed to this stressful feeling. First, there was just so much content, and most of it was not written in plain language, which made it hard to scan and make sense of the resources and its relevance. Most guides did not include what students called editorializing information. In particular, students wanted information from the LibGuide author on how to best use the suggested resources or in what context. For example, there were resources that are best for undergraduate students doing a literature review, or what resources might be best for a PhD candidate writing a dissertation. And this information that was shared could be helpful in scanning kind of large guides. Students frequently brought up that within a guide, there was no clear information architecture. There were a lot of tabs per guide, which made it confusing to know how resources were organized. Several guides included irrelevant or broken integrations or links. This included RSS feeds, Twitter feeds, and generally broken links or outdated reference or taken down websites. Lastly, many guides used to have confusing or irrelevant pictures, such as stock images. While images can help break up static text, it was not helpful when the image did not contribute to the making sense of the content or resources. So finally, in addition, there were several visual design components which exacerbated the content issues that I've now described. The information was presented in cluttered or bulky ways, including wide text boxes with long paragraphs of text, or content that was squeezed into narrow columns. There was limited white space and spacing between resources, text boxes, and columns. And finally, many guides had significant information below the fold, meaning students had to scroll all the way down to kind of get to the content they wanted to access. Okay. So the biggest takeaways we had from this research were that first, LibGuides have too much information, which is designed in cluttered and disorganized ways. This causes a cognitive overload and a stressful feeling for students that they are never going to get through the guide. And then second, the design inhibited usability. It is difficult to scan and assess for resource type, purpose, or relevancy. It's also difficult to navigate or easily find the information they needed. So ultimately, users loved the idea of the research guide, but felt that the resource was too cumbersome or stressful to be actually useful. Okay. So with that context and kind of this understanding that the research produced, I'm going to talk now how we transferred these findings into an actual plan for remediating the content. So on this screen, you have an image description, an image of an accessibility icon figure of a human being with arms and legs outstretched in a circle. Okay. First and foremost, NYU is committed to supporting an information technology environment that provides individuals who have a diverse range of hearing, movement, sight, and/or cognitive abilities. And we want to provide all of these individuals with an opportunity to participate in the university programs, benefits, and services. So a little bit more background. In 2018, NYU's Office of Digital Accessibility began a university-wide effort to remediate all content across its web presence. And so it was across digital environments. And they also, part of this project was to skill up those delivering content, which the library is a big content producer. So we did a lot of training ourselves through the Office of Digital Accessibility, and then we brought this back to our team in the libraries. And so again, I mentioned the UX team, like the product owns many of the software in the library, and so we were the stewards and kind of we were the stewards of this work. And so we worked with our colleagues in web services in the library to do both system work and then to work with our colleagues who were creating content for the guides to develop and to update their content within the system. So we were, I'm just checking my notes. So throughout the remediation project planning and implementation, we use principles of universal design for learning, and we're guided by WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and its core principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. I say these things to just, again, imply we had the research, we had some guiding principles from the university-wide digital accessibility work that had been undertaken, and then we were informed by, again, principles that are inform accessibility work. Okay, so applying these principles now and best practices. So we did two things. We did system-wide improvements, which I just mentioned. We work with our web services team to accomplish. We are very fortunate to have web support in the libraries. We don't have to work with central university web teams. And so we took a look at the system in the Spring Share system, and we were able to understand more about what the system was capable of, as well as then to be able to customize it based on our needs. So the first step of our LibGuides accessibility work was to address the system-wide improvements. And in this phase, we drew heavily from the research findings that Harini had conducted and that I presented to you, which included reducing cognitive load, improving the usability and readability, better consistency and predictability across the guides, and then a more inclusive visual design. So some of the details of this work included new CSS, so new cascading style sheets to bring the look and feel and top navigation design in line with our main website so that it looked more synonymous. It looked more connected to our library.nyu.edu site. Okay, we set fonts and styles. We used a sans serif font. We ensured that the color choices met color contrast guidelines. We updated heading styles to better align with logical heading orders and semantic structure within the content management system. And we told the content creators that they couldn't then go in and apply custom style to their guides. Again, we wanted to keep a consistent and accessible quality of the guides across the system. So instead of custom CSS, excuse me. So we created custom default templates in the system to make our guides layout more uniform. So I think you quickly saw an example of a LibGuide with top level navigation in a couple slides ago, and that was something that we wanted to move away from. And so we created a template in our system that is side navigation. So it's side navigation in the one column structure of content. This custom default template made our guides layout more uniform, as well as it reduced the cognitive load when moving between guides because the consistency was not there beforehand, and now it is. We turned on the LibGuides accessibility feature, which reserves heading level 1 for page titles and heading level 2 for box titles. This helped to encourage better use of logical heading orders within the guides, mostly in the rich text box content, box type rather. I know you received a link earlier for a worksheet, which does include another link, which you can see on the screen as well. The link will take you to the LibGuide we put together that outlines this work and we used as a training tool and resource to remediate the content. And that's for the public to see as well. So that's something you can take a look at and model for your own organizations if you are interested. But the URL for that is, thank you, the link is being pasted again into the chat. Okay. So we then had to move, once we put these system-wide updates into practice, into practice, we needed to then focus on what the content creators could do in their guides to remediate the content. And that took a little bit more work because as I said earlier, there were over 100 content creators at NYU. So it was a big project to train and skill up 100 different content creators on digital accessibility principles, and then more specifically, kind of what needed to be done within the LibGuides system. Thus, we did create this guide that guided people through the process. But we also had a robust outreach and communication strategy, and again, applied these universal design principles and just universal design for learning. We tried to meet people where they were comfortable and where they were at. So we provided a guide, we provided videos, we provided live trainings. We provided communication methods. They could email us, they could send us kind of forms. We were doing as much as we could to kind of robustly support everybody's individual needs to meet the milestones of this project. So some dates to keep in mind as we rolled through this project is that we began our outreach for this and our communications about this in the fall of 2019. We started doing basic web accessibility training. We then pivoted into the spring, summer because of COVID, because of the COVID pandemic. We did a lot more, instead of in-person sessions, we did a lot more kind of Zoom sessions and video recorded sessions. And then we asked everybody over the summer of 2020 to do this work. So we gave everybody from May 1st until August 31st to work on their guides and to remediate them based on the milestones we had set out. And then in fall 2020, the user experience team began checking this work to make sure that the guides were actually being brought into accessibility compliance. And we now have an ongoing cycle of this. Okay, as I mentioned, we created several training artifacts, such as a LibGuide. We held drop-in sessions. We conducted these accessibility bites where it was a 15-minute, like, how do you make contextual links, or what is alt text? And so we held these smaller sessions to kind of give people a little, not an hour session to have to learn things, but these little times to really get to know a different accessibility topic. And then we also provided a report to every single content creator and every single guide they remediated. We went through and kind of checked off their milestones and had a conversation with them about what still needed to be done or what we changed in the system ourselves. And so that report really then helped continue to inform the work that needed to be done. Okay, so how did this actually help people? And what were some of the consequences of this? We were also working to change hearts and minds. We were building empathy through this project. Not every content author had known what digital accessibility was or why we needed to do it or why it mattered. And it really did offer an opportunity to make a large impact on making both the LibGuides content more accessible, but other content we produce in the division, whether it's worksheets or it's presentations we make, or it's the way we do a chat reference conversation. We were able to really build these principles in. So the project allows for creators to make long-term, ongoing, and lasting changes in their approach to librarianship and the services we provide to make a more accessible experience for everybody. So this avoids us also as well being ensnared of the cycle of accessibility debt that can be difficult to mitigate going on. And so, you know, again, now it's thought of kind of from the beginning as opposed to an afterthought. Okay. So I did want to show another example of a remediated guide. This is the same guide that you saw a little while ago, but it's now with the updated principles applied, the updated kind of structure for what a guide should operate like. And so the image description includes the screenshot from the Mushrooms Accessibility Demo Guide. It was offered part of the training and it was remediated, right? And so the header banner now matches NYU Libraries digital branding. The font and color contrast are improved and accessible. Images, although you can't see it on the slide, the images do now have alt text, as well as the infographic has a long text description. So we did, again, apply principles to improve the experience. Okay. I know we have a little bit more time to talk about what was actually done in the guide. And so I want to provide some milestones. I've mentioned the word milestones a bit now. And we designed the project to include 14 milestones that content creators could achieve kind of incrementally as they move through the remediation. And so we did give content creators 3 months from May 1st, 2020 to August 31st, 2020 to pace themselves and to apply these milestones across the guides that they managed. And so I'm going to present the milestones that NYU identified, but I do want to encourage each of you in your own systems to know what your system calls for and to know what your design principles are. And you can make your own decisions about the milestones. So we did what worked best for our guides, our content creators in our system. Hopefully some of them are transferable though. Okay, the remediation milestones were arranged so that content creators could gradually progress through them and build up their skills to encourage long-lasting behavioral change. We didn't ask guide editors to do everything all at once, right? Again, across these 3 months, we gave kind of 2 week kind of pacing to get through the milestones. This enabled folks to build confidence and to kind of understand and know that they would be able to actually do this work and that it wasn't going to be too daunting. So we did provide the LibGuide for remediation to support the project. We offered workshops and drop-in sessions. My colleagues and I in the user experience department were available all summer for on-demand kind of support. And so in the sheet, the sheet that's been linked in the chat that I'm sharing with you, you'll also have a little bit more access to the resources that we provided, and you can see kind of what people had access to. These milestones included ensuring that there were friendly URLs for the guides. I think maybe if you're super familiar with the guide system or any web or content management system, they usually generate these not human readable URLs. And so we wanted to ensure that each guide, as well as each page of every guide, had friendly URLs. And so that was really, I think for me, it was like a game because I could go through and make my choose my title, put my dashes and click save and move on to the next thing. But this was one of those simple remediation practices that really could make a big difference. And I think, again, we started with that to build the confidence that this remediation accessibility improvement is doable. The next milestone we asked for was to describe the guide and each guide's pages. This helps so that when users come to a guide, they know what to expect from it. They can know if it's going to be serving their needs. As well, it improves search engine optimization. And so it makes the guides more discoverable. The next milestone we went on to would be consistent visual branding. We were able to do some system-wide updates, as I provided a little overview of, but there was still lots of text within the guides that maybe were set at a different font or set at a different size or set at a color that didn't make sense. We were discouraging the use of color text within guides to kind of convey meaning of things. And so we asked for individuals to kind of go through and make sure that the font was consistent with what we had set in the system, and to update kind of wherever they had used alternative fonts or sizing. We then moved on. Now that those 3 milestones were reached, we moved on to asking guide owners to take a look at the structure and design of their content. And this mostly included working within rich text boxes. So this meant if there was lots of content, such as long paragraphs or multiple lists or various other kind of big chunks of text, as the research kind of implied there had been, we asked content authors to go in and apply heading level structure to give the content some semantic structure, as well as kind of to ease cognitive load, to allow for kind of clear indications of what the content was about. And we really had to do a little bit of work with this to do some training about what semantic structure and kind of heading levels are. And we also had to ensure that they weren't using heading levels for style purposes, right? Because they liked the size and font. They needed to know that heading 3 has to come before heading 4. Can't skip a heading. And we did a lot of training around using the different tools that were available in the rich text editor, which include heading level structure. Okay. We also encourage folks in this milestone to, instead of using long paragraphs of text, to try and see if we could pull out information that could be listed, if it's steps to to a process, or if it's how to search the catalog, or again, like a list of resources. We asked individuals to kind of pull out and make structured and unstructured lists. We encouraged the content creators to edit their paragraphs of text and other things to ensure that the language used was clear and simple. And we also, encourage the use of maximizing white space for cognitive load, again, to allow for an individual coming to the site to not be overwhelmed by graphics and text and whatnot. And then finally, in this area of kind of structure and design, I mentioned we had developed a template where we had pushed kind of the navigation from the top tabs to the side. And this was something that we were going to kind of force across the system at a certain point. But we were asking individuals to go in and do it before we forced it through the system, so they could see kind of where the content would fall. So we switched over side navigation, or asked them to switch over side navigation. The next milestone included another link milestone, but there were lots of places in our system where the links were not contextual, meaning people just pasted in the URL. And so we asked folks to go through and identify where those links were and to make them contextual, and also to avoid the language click here, or use this link, and using those words click here, and link as the link, because it's not very contextual. And so we had to do a little bit of scaling up about how screen readers engage with the content of a page, and how some assistive technology can provide, a list of the different links. And if they're not contextual, it's not really easy to understand what that link will be taking you to. We also encourage folks to set any links that took them outside of the guide that they were currently in to open in a new window. Another milestone was to check for broken links. As you're probably familiar, the guide system is filled with links, and so the link milestones were many. And so this was a huge thing as well that came across in our research, and the users were encountering broken links consistently. And so this was an opportunity for us to remind content creators that the guide is a living website and needs regular kind of updating and checking. So we were able to both systematically go through, kind of probably guide by guide, but we were also able to use the broken link tool that's in the system, in the LibGuide system. Another milestone that we asked our creators to address, this wasn't applicable to everybody, but it was to check for broken links and non-English language HTML tags. We have campuses in Shanghai and Abu Dhabi. We have lots of people kind of speaking alternative languages. We have guides that are not English in our system, so we had to apply HTML tags. We moved through to then add alt text for images and infographics, add long text description. Finally, the last couple of milestones we wanted to achieve were encouraging folks to not use tables for formatting. And if they did use tables, to apply kind of heading structure to the tables. This didn't happen too often in the system, but the next milestone was to check all the documents that we were linking out to, whether it was a PDF or a Word document, and to ensure that they were accessible to the best of their capacity. Finally, the last and most complicated kind of milestones included video captions and transcribing media. And this was something we needed to work kind of really closely with the content creators to ensure that they were meeting best practices for these. And we do suggest the final milestone was to avoid gallery and tabbed boxes. This is not something that I've gotten some feedback from other places I presented on this too, that these are now more accessible through the SpringShare system, but the gallery boxes, because sometimes they auto kind of carousel through, that was not a good accessibility practice. And then the tabbed boxes, if you use a tab box inside of a box, sometimes the content gets hidden. So we asked folks to avoid using those. And I do just want to quickly check on time. Rebecca, I know I just saw your video come on. I was looking at 11:40. I'm like, I'm going to 12, but maybe it's time for questions right now so I can wrap up. I'm just seeing nodding. Okay, perfect.
We have one question. So if you want to go
Sure.
until maybe the other 3 minutes, if you have more to say, and then
Perfect.
we'll start wrapping up at like 11:45.
Perfect, thank you. So just quickly, what's next? After these milestones, after the big remediation project, right, it's still a work in progress. It's a cyclical thing. Content still keeps being created and edited. And so we recognized after this project that we needed to come up with a sustainable way to support new librarians, new people that come into the Division of Libraries, as well as our longstanding members of the community. So we've created a style manual. This was not something that existed when we started doing the remediation work, and the accessibility work very much informs the style manual. We have an onboarding, training, and curriculum now. We're working on developing a maintenance schedule. So what in the summers, we'll have a more robust kind of maintenance of the system, but every month we ask folks to check on their links and to kind of do the little things they can do, incrementally throughout the year. This, as I implied, kind of started a larger campaign to ensure accessibility as part of our content and communications. So it has rippling kind of implications and effects in our culture of our organization. And then just if you are interested, we were encouraged to write this project up, and it will be coming out in a Association of College and Research Libraries book on universal design for learning. So that'll be available in the next year. Okay, so that is the end. I know I just went through so much, and I know there's one question in the Q&A, so I appreciate your time. If you have more questions, I encourage you to reach out to me, and I will take a look at the Q&A now. Thank you so much.
And I'm happy to read the questions out too. So we have 2 questions that just came in. The first one, what percentage of your guides were remediated, and how did you work with creators who did not want to or resisted compliance?
Thank you for that question. So I don't have an exact number of percentage wise, but I'd say it was at least 75% were remediated, and the 25% that weren't remediated, likely because maybe the guide didn't need to be remediated. They considered taking it offline, because that happens too, where a guide was created at some point and then it didn't really get used much anymore. And then a smaller percentage of that were individuals who just didn't get into the program and didn't kind of do their part to update the guides for various reasons, whether they were busy or on sabbatical or had other projects going on. And so we do still take the remediated guides. If somebody emails me, I've had 2 people in this last week let me know, like, hey, I've updated something. Can you please review it? And so we continue to kind of work and accept that and kind of update the guides. But we did have to put a hard stop. So I've mentioned the timeline already a little bit, but from May 1st to August 31st. And we gave everybody until August 31st. And if they didn't then submit a report that they had done this, submit a form saying that they had completed the remediation, we took their guides offline. We did need to be a little bit tough about it, because we had carrots and sticks. We needed to encourage people to do this work, and of course we did it in hopefully the friendliest way possible. And like I said, we still accept if people do contact us and they're like, I finally got into the guides, we quickly review them and put them back online.
Fantastic. And that's understandable. You have to have consequences. So
exactly.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Okay. So another question. My vendor uses tables, actually encourages them in website creation to keep things looking consistent. Tables on web pages shouldn't be used then, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think tables for content layout shouldn't be used. That was our approach in the LibGuide system. I'm not sure about other content management systems, though. It's entirely possible that the design of other content management systems does allow for tables for layout to be used, and then they can be made accessible. But I'd have to kind of see the content management system to speak more expertly about that. But again, specifically within LibGuides, we were discouraging the use of tables for layout. If there was data, right, like a list of call numbers or a list of sometimes we do have data. We have a data services department. So if they were like listing software, again, we could use a table for those reasons as long as they are labeled with headings and using the accessibility features built into the platform.
Thank you. We have one more question. So again, if you have any other, please submit them via the Q&A. But in the meantime, one last question. Do you know the title of the ACRL UDL book that will have your chapter?
Yeah, I wish I should have had that checked up. I should have had that queued up. I think it's Universal Design for Learning in Academic Libraries. I think it's as simple as that, but I can check my email really quickly, or actually, I know I've shared resources now, both with the presentation as well as the worksheet that kind of is a supplement to this presentation, and I can drop a link into that book's information there I can provide, because I don't want to give the wrong title.
Yeah, that would be perfect. If you want to update me with any of that, I'll make sure it gets it. Because I know if you'd sent me Google stuff, I probably turned it into a PDF. So just
Sure.
let me know and I'll make sure that it gets updated
Sure.
for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I don't see any other questions that came in. So again, we'll start wrapping up, but if any other questions come in, please, we'll keep an eye on them. Lauren, thank you so much. This was very informative. Obviously, this symposium is full of academic librarians who are very familiar with LibGuides. So I think this is very interesting for them to hear. So we really appreciate you taking the time, and we appreciate what you're doing too to make everything more accessible.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to thank you all for attending this session. Lauren, thank you for presenting to us. We really do appreciate it. Okay, thank you all.